And we're doing a special interview with the great classical musician, the cellist Yo-Yo Ma, who is here in Washington, D.C. for a special project, a special tour that we will let him tell you about himself. We've been chatting a little bit beforehand, and I want to just kind of wander a little bit first, and I think that'll be okay with him, but we'll ask him. First of all, Yo-Yo Ma, thanks so much for coming on the program.
RJ, this is such a great pleasure to be on your show, but it's an even greater pleasure to be in Anacostia for the day.
Well, we thank you so much, really. I mean, the community of Anacostia is an exciting place for me to work. It's an exciting place in the 7 years that we've been doing this show, exciting place to see the changes, the growth, the commitment to the arts, the commitment to the community. So we are absolutely delighted to have you. But I did want to talk to you. I mentioned before that, I have a little bit of musical background, which I feel absurd saying in your presence. But what occurred to me to ask you, and it's totally from left field, which is when I was a kid, a friend of mine who was a musician, a very good musician, his father's name was Manfred Kleins. And Manfred Kleins was a pianist in Vienna. He came over here, became a scientist, and he knew a lot of musicians from Europe. So he had them imagine in their minds any piece they might be playing, or Toscanini did it, any piece they might be conducting, and he had everybody, Pablo Casals, everybody. And he found that no matter how many times they imagined it in their mind, they were always within a second or two, no matter the length of the piece, that there was and he tracked their physiological responses and found, and I don't know if this has ever been confirmed, but found a kind of curve that was common not to the musician, but to the composer. So that any piece by Bach, for example, would show the same physiological responses, and it would be different from any piece by Mozart that they might play in their mind. And the reason why I asked is because I know I'm about to ask you about something called the Bach Project. Do you feel Bach has a kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, a kind of spiritual or emotional or psychophysiological signature that you find in playing his music?
Well, I think there's obviously a signature to every human being that is unique to their physiology and to their way of thinking, because everybody's brain is different and everybody receives visual, oral, tactile, through touch information differently and at different proportions. I think with Bach, what I love about Bach, there are three traits I love about him. And one of them is that, he was orphaned by the time he was 9. And so he grew up with older siblings. And I think there's the sense of empathy for loss or for joy or for solace is so apparent in his writing. It's a very, very humanistic point of view, but at the same time, I think Bach as a scientist composer, someone that is very, very rigorous with how he provides that arc in music. Whether you talk about narrative or storytelling, there's a proportionality. He worked with numbers that is in a very precise way to describe things like infinity. How do you describe infinity, right? And the last part of him. So there's the emotional side. There's the objective side, and then there's the I'm not the center of the universe side, which I think is really great, and especially in this day and age, for somebody who is obviously a master at doing something, but he's not saying I'm the greatest. He's just saying this is what I found, and this is what it is, which is, I think, very comforting because, in that sense, he's like everybody's favorite uncle whom you can go to and tell him or aunt anything, but they will understand how you feel, but they'll also keep it at arm's length and be able to give you a little perspective.
So what you're describing is, some people would say, is a sort of a beautiful representation of the three dimensions of what it means to be human. the intellectual or rational, mathematical, what might be called the soulful, the emotional, the heart, empathy, all of those things, mirror neurons, whatever. And then the third piece, what some people might call the spiritual, or the sense of one's place in the universe, humility, however you might place it. But you're really talking about, though, that seems to me that the connectedness, because I know you've talked about Bach as being a figure that everyone can relate to, whose work everyone can relate to. So I think you're engaged in something right now called the Bach Project, whereas I understand it, you're going to play in, what is it, 36 locations or something. You're going to do his solo pieces for cello. Is that correct?
Right, that is correct. Well, the thing is, like, so I'm 63 years old. And for some people, that's very old. I think that's pretty old. And for some people, it's quite young. But I think, and I've been playing the cello for 58 years, 59 years. And what does that mean to have played something, done one thing for 59 years? And I've lived with the Bach suites for about 58 years. So that's a long time to spend telling a story, or telling a certain number of stories. But what's interesting is that for those people that have favorite books or Harry Potter or movies, and they see over and over again, it kind of changes over time because we change. And so we see different things in stories. And one of the things that I've sort of received from playing that music is that at different times in my life, it has been incredibly helpful to me. And I think the more I play music, the more that I've asked, what is it for? I realize that music is, in a way, is a service. It is something that we invented to help us. And since I can't keep a steady job, I have to tour and go around the world to play for a living. And I get to be a guest in many, many communities. And so part of wanting to play Bach is a kind of like a thank you to say, look, this has helped me. But when I go into community, I want to actually find all the people that are doing wonderful things to help each other. And I think that's the essence of culture. It's people doing things or inventing ways to solve problems by either telling stories, like what we did this afternoon, hearing, playback theater. What did they do? They were actually putting a mirror to the community and getting the stories and then playing it back. Mm-hmm. And what does that do? It actually brings all of us together. So I think of culture as sort of something that turns the other into us. If I didn't know something about you and you tell me something about you and then I act it out and you're pleased with it, well, we've actually included you into my view of the world, right?
Well,
and so,
yes, and I'm sure you know about Daniel Levitin and some of the other
Sure.
scientists who have looked at exploring what was the evolutionary and neurological role of music. They theorized that music was really developed by human beings as a way, if I didn't know you and I encountered you in the forest, let's say, or a desert or whatever, and sang to you, that if the sincerity of my expression to you touched your heart, then we've established trust, and therefore I could approach you and shake your hand or whatever. You seem to be describing that on a sort of a maximal level. One of the things that struck me listening to you play these pieces earlier today, or play the one piece earlier today, is that you've played this for 58 years. You play it with such passion and emotion. And, I think a lot of people might think, well, if you've played something for 58 years, you're probably getting a little tired of it,
Well, the same way that you and I might get really tired looking at a sunrise or sunset because we've been looking at it for so many years, but we don't.
Right.
And why is that?
Right.
Because even though it's the same sun, it's the same earth, somehow everyone is a little different, or we're a little different every day. but somehow that that thing, the cyclical part of the sunrise, is something that anchors us and keeps us fascinated, because it makes us wonder, it makes us ask questions, it makes us reflect on, how about 1,000 sunsets ago? That would be something like under 3 years. What was life like? You kind of, there's certain things that make us think about things. And I find that as I thought a lot about things before I was 12 years old, because you're wondering, what's the world like?
Right.
What's going on, and what's going to happen when I grow up and whatever. And then when you get really busy, you kind of get very focused on things, and you stop thinking about, I'm going to just think about the origins of life. But as you get older, you push sort of, you're getting to the point of pushing up the daisies, so to speak.
Don't
kind
rush me.
of,
I know what you
exactly,
mean.
yeah.
Yes, right.
But you ask yourself, well, so how has life been?
Right.
What's it for? Am I doing something that is meaningful? And so the object of this Bach project is, in many ways, it's a very selfish thing to do, is that I want to actually go to places around the world that can be difficult places that have, that have, but that makes me think about things, whether it's borders, between Texas and Mexico, or between the two Koreas, or whatever, whatever borders, or whether where great change has taken place, whether it's Puerto Rico that went through Hurricane Maria, or places in Europe with refugees, or refugees in the United States. It's places where people are, where a lot of change is taking place, and where there are people who are helping. And I want to actually honor, locate, and talk with the people who are helping to understand what they're doing. And because so often they're so busy helping that they're our unsung heroes, like what we witnessed today. Like, this is, Anacostia is a community that I think has so many heroes, so many artistic people that are using all that they know to kind of reflect back, and to deepen, and to enrich, and to invigorate, and to sustain and strengthen their beloved community. And that's so wonderful. For example, I met people who are from Anacostia, but also people who lived other places but wanted to come to Anacostia because they felt this was a place that gave them a sense of identity and community. And my goodness, in this day and age where everybody's talking about the breakdown in things, here's a place where we just met a group of people that are obviously working tirelessly to actually provide this kind of safety net and mutual support system to make it a place that's going to thrive.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I know we have to go, so I'm just going to make a final statement and then let you make the final statement. I was thinking as you were talking, when I was in Africa, the Sufis, which I spent a little bit of time there, the Sufis there would say that every human being has the entire universe contained and reflected within them. I get that sense from your interpretation of Bach, that Bach was a mirror to the universe. I get the sense of your project now. I wish I could go with you, because I get the sense of your project as going to these places and being a mirror, or channeling this mirror of the entire universe as it's reflected in the individual human being to each of the people and communities you're going to see. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I'll let you
That's
say the
a
last
very
word.
wonderful point you made about sort of like in every individual is contained the universe. I mean, that's actually true in terms of, you spill, or you put a cup of water into an ocean, right? And you wait a couple of years, and any body of water that has touched that place, you will find molecules of water that, so it does spread all over the place. And in that sense, I would like to say that we talk a lot about equity, equality. We're trying to define equity and access and culture and justice. And one of the things that I think something as beautifully invented as Bach, and Bach is not the only thing. Over history, people have invented so much that in fact is so good, it belongs to the world. It belongs to humanity. So it's not about one group of people. And speaking of access, I think that part of access or equity is that you want the good stuff or any good stuff to be available within reach of everybody. And I don't mean material goods, but it's the stuff that we've invented that makes us understand things a little more, whether it's ourselves, others, or our environment. And I think that we must build on, so that when Melvin the elder gave the blessings and the libations from this morning, he included the whole world in what he said, and that was made available to a guest. I was an outsider, but I was one of the people, he included everybody. And that's an incredible privilege, to have a community open themselves and trust me enough to be able to talk about what is on their minds, what they care about. And I think if we do this over and over and over again, everywhere, we will find our common humanity. We will start caring about people both near and far, because these days, people that are near and far are moving around. And so we're dealing with this change. And that's one way of being able to cope with exponential change that's happening in our world. And we have to be able to build the basis for trust, so that everything else can be built on top of it.
Well, beautifully said, and I would love to talk to you more, but I have a feeling there are people who'd be very upset if I kept you much longer.
RJ, it's great to speak with you, and you obviously are very thoughtful and learned person, and you care deeply and are committed to the work that you're doing, to community building, and to actually, just strengthen our lives.
Well, it was an honor talking with you.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Thank you.
Godspeed in your travels, and we'll be watching.